My name's Alan Samry, and glad to be here at the library to talk about books, of course, specifically my books. And we'll kind of start with Stump the Librarian, which I thank everyone for their support on this book. I was a staff member here at Fairhope Library for 12 years. Loved my time here, and was really thankful for my patrons and our great staff. I don't know what you've been up to during this crazy time, but I have been looking back at some of my older writing, some of the writing I did as an undergrad and as a grad student. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've been self-publishing, which is under the banner of Stump the Presses. So the first one is it's an architectural study on the Cape Cod house. And some folks may know, or some folks may not, that I'm originally from Cape Cod, was born and raised there, and only lived in one Cape Cod house and during that time, but was really fascinated with the history once I moved to Baldwin County. So I kind of went back to that. I'm always interested in historic preservation, and that's what you'll find most of these things are about. From what buildings are made to my book, Stump the Librarian, which is about how people are made in some ways as an amputee. So the next book that I did was a couple of local specific buildings, which was Montgomery Hill Baptist Church up in Montgomery Hill, which is near Fort Mims, and also Bayside Academy, their administration building, which was the old Howard Hotel. And I combined these two books, these two buildings, just because it was early research. And but I also really just wanted people to have another record for this. There's some historical things out there, but it's mostly articles. So I wanted to combine these two pieces of, two of the oldest buildings in Baldwin County, and I think they really deserve to be recorded and noted. So they're not just an architectural history, but they're a history of the owners. There's some structural analysis to show you how it was made. Mortise and tenon in these buildings. Fantastic stuff. The next one, and so I focused on, specific buildings, and then with the Cape Cod house, I went to a kind of a building style, if you will, an architectural style. And then I transitioned that when I moved here. I think in 2007, I really became just completely fascinated with these local building blocks called, they call them here, Clay City tile. But as I did some of this research, I realized that this was like, these structural clay tiles were a national trend. But most of the time, these particular products were covered over. So you didn't see what they actually looked like. So this research, again, was from early on. This is from 2007, but this is my newly published book, Clay City Tile, Frank Brown, and the company that built Fairhope, because Frank Brown was a founder who arrived here in 1897, believe it or not, with a sawmill. Prior to all of his brick-making things, he started with his own sawmill. And like I said, when I moved here, I became fascinated with this stuff, and I still am fascinated with it. I'm learning about it today, and you're going to learn about it today in a little bit as well. We're going to go outside, and I'll point out some neat, interesting things. But I have it organized, like, to tell you a little bit about Clay City Tile, I have it organized so that there's an introduction, but I treat the introduction as if you were on a driving tour. So the driving tour starts at the pier, of course, and then it heads out to Clay City, which is on Clay City Road, off of County Road 33. And the book kind of tells you the story about Frank Brown, of course, and his family and the company, Clay Products, Inc., and the production process out there, how they made the tile, and also they made brick as well and other things along the way. Then I get into a structural analysis, so you're going to actually look inside and see some buildings that are made of Clay City tile, some that you can see from the exterior that are obvious. You can see the block, the orange block, and then others that aren't so obvious that I needed to get inside or I needed to look underneath. I'm interested in the bones of a house and bones of buildings in general. That's really how you find out what's made of Clay City tile and what isn't ultimately. So, and then I've got some history on some really significant buildings from the Museum of History, which was built in 1927, to some other downtown buildings, as well as some farm buildings, and there's a few craftsman cottages in there as well, and even a librarian's home. So it's great to be in the library, but in order to really get an appreciation for all of the buildings that are made of Clay City tile that are really around us. We're going to head outside, and I'm going to point out a few. Some that you'll recognize because you can see it, but others that you would never know are Clay City tile. So, thanks. So 8 School Street was built between 1923 and 1925 by Raymond Dyson of Dyson & Sons Construction, which you'll read in my book has a lengthy history with the Browns and Clay Products, Inc. So the next building on our tour is, this is 9 School Street, and a lot of folks recognize this as the Fairhope Center for the Writing Arts, the cottage, the Wolf Cottage as they call it now. But it was originally built by a man named Edwin Sheldon Jr., who was a really well-known local builder around here in the 20s and 30s especially. And he built this cottage for himself, sort of a Spanish eclectic, I think is what they call this style building. It's been modified since then. He built it in 1927, and but he moved shortly afterwards because the Bradford family had a house next door, kind of on the corner of Magnolia and North School, no longer there. It's a parking lot now. But they had their house was there, and then they bought the house he built from him and turned it into a rental cottage. But behind all this was the Amaryllis Garden. So the Bradford family was known for their amaryllises as well as their camellias. And it's just a really unique spot here. And it's interesting that this area didn't grow quite like the other parts of Fairhope. And there's some hints about the fact that there was a power plant across Bancroft. And there was also an ice plant. So both of those were kind of noisy, industrial kind of sounding buildings that this area tended to grow a little bit slower than some of the other parts of Fairhope. So this building was built in 1930 by Edwin Sheldon Jr. And of course it's exposed Clay City tile. So that's kind of what's really cool about this. We're at 54, as you can see, North School. So in a half a block here, we've got the only 3 out of the 4 buildings on this block are Clay City tile. So fascinating stuff to me. What's interesting about this is it was built for an artist. Unfortunately, the artist is lost to us. And the original building had a kiln inside of it. So there's a flue that's still in there from the kiln, and there's also some of the floor is made with some old pottery shards. So thanks for watching, listening, and of course thanks for reading. Clay City Tile, Frank Brown and the company that built Fairhope. Check it out at Fairhope Public Library or where you can buy books. Thanks.